Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. So, I'm just deciding to talk about Grand Alliance Chaos now, after recently covering Order. Yeah, looking good so far. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit shorter than the last one, as let's be clear, Order is and probably always will be the biggest of the Grand Alliances. But that's not to say there's not some good stuff here as well. So, let's get started. So, new Chaos War Scrolls. Well, one thing I didn't notice is they're going to be a little bit smaller in amount this time around, for obvious reasons that we'll get to in a minute. There's definitely been some changes all around to the various armies. Not quite to the extent that I was expecting. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's definitely been some change-ups to the various armies, but I don't know. I guess I kind of pictured in my head there'd be like more drastic change-ups. Not saying this is a bad thing. It's just something that caught me by surprise. And like I said, there's definitely going to be some retired units going around. It is what it is. We all saw it coming. There were some things I didn't expect to see, like. We all know, again, as I mentioned, we were all there for the great calling of 2024 before the edition dropped. But these War Scrolls have definitely shown me as time goes on that GW is becoming more and more rampant in phasing out things like the Finecast models. So, yeah, personally, I think that's probably for the best. A lot of those models are kind of showing their age, and in a lot of cases, they weren't really like meshing well with the more updated models. But still, it's something you need to be aware of in case you might not be know about it. So, yeah. So, kicking things off with, I guess we're going to be starting with what I would say is the secondary poster boys of the Age of Ruin, the Skaven. So, good news out of the way first. They're looking pretty strong. Oh yeah, like Skaven, in my opinion, I think have always been at least decent for the most part. Like they've grown and shrank in meta dominance as the editions have gone on, but going into fourth, they're looking pretty good. One of the reasons I think they've always had this is something I call big army syndrome. Because Age of Sigmar, especially when it comes to its army listings, kind of can vary drastically on how many units are in each army. Like, for example, on one extreme, you have the Sons of Behemat that technically I think only has like 5 or 6 units, and then you have things like the Stormcast that I think are still over 70. The Skaven are definitely on the higher end of this, and because of that, they have so many different types of units to call upon. They have magic casters, they have war machines, they have weapons teams, they have hordes, they have elite. Because of this, in my opinion, I think this is one of the reasons why armies like Skaven, Seraphon, Stormcast can always find a way to work around the meta because they have enough tools to do it. So again, this is working in the Skaven's favor again. As for the army traits, they're looking pretty good overall. Like a lot of the new army traits, they're often meant to like work around a specific gimmick that they got. One of them being like how they interact with their gnaw holes. Honestly, similar to Caradron Overlords, a lot of their army rules basically just kind of revolves around how they move around with the gnaw holes. In addition to just like movement shenanigans in general. Not necessarily saying this is a bad thing. It just means like when you first look at the army traits, you think that it's a ton of rules, but then when you actually start reading through it, it's basically just laying the foundations for movement shenanigans. If you really get right down to it. One thing I did also notice off the bat here, I would say out of all the great clans of the Skaven, the Eshin definitely have so far been shafted the most. Like, I feel like all the other great clans, like the Molder, the Pestilence, the Verminous, the Scryer, they all got something going for them. If it was not rules updates, it was model updates, or if it was maybe model additions. The Eshin really kind of didn't get much. Actually, in fact, they lost stuff. In addition to this, too, I think they're pretty much the only one that's not technically like, you know, represented with a formation. Like, all the other Skaven clans all get, like, a formation based around them except the Eshin. Now, I don't know if that's because maybe, like, GW has favoritism towards the others, or maybe if it's just the fact is they only get 4 formations and there's multiple and there's at least 5 clans. It could be either or. Also, another thing is models also got removed as well. Some models, as I said before, GW is continuing the trend of sending a lot of like older models, especially fine cast models, to Legends. And so the Skaven lost some more units in this book too. I can't remember if these were the ones that were announced a while back, but just like case in point right here, for example, we like here the biggest example people are pointing out is the Foot Plague Priest. Yeah, that's gone. So make sure so before you start throwing your army together, make sure that those models you're using are actually represented in the index, because they could be gone. On a more positive note here, still looking good with shooting. Again, Skaven have always been good with that. They've gotten some new models in regards to shooting. Their shooting is still very powerful. There's ways to buff shooting. They still have pretty much one of the few ranged units in the game that still that can still shoot out mortal wounds in the game. That's still pretty good. And even bigger than that though. And this I love. Skaven finally have proper recursion. I mean, this is something I wanted forever. Like, honestly, it made no sense to me last edition that pretty much every other army that some that aren't even technically Horde armies had some ways to bring units back or bring new units onto the table. Like you know, all the God army, like all the Chaos God armies had ways to summon in demons. You know, Moon Clan, like Gloomspite Gits could bring back destroyed armies. Even Stormcast I think at one point had some shenanigans to do that. But the Skaven didn't really have anything like that. The closest or maybe there's some others I'm missing, but the biggest one I remember is that Clan Rats could bring back like D3 models or something. Like, I never really understood why an army that's basically the poster child for Horde tactics couldn't bring out models, like not models, but whole units back. So I'm glad they finally got proper recursion now. Sure, it's tied to their knot holes, but whatever, it's fine. Again, the monsters and War Machines, I'd say monsters especially, are looking very good this edition. I've only briefly looked through them all, but from what I'm seeing here, your Hell Pit Abominations, your Skaven Greater Demons, I forget what they're called, Vermin Lords, I think. Anyway, they're looking pretty good. Your War Machines are all looking good. Your artillery's nice. Your big rickety platforms that go screaming around the table by like the pestilence and whatnot. They're fine. Yeah, those are still good, and honestly, I think they actually got better because a lot of like some of the restrictions, like for example, I think, for example, like the pestilence, like Screaming Bell or something, or the one I don't know, it's that big platform with like the swinging incense banner. I forget what it's called, but I don't think that needs like Skaven next to it to move anymore. So generally speaking, monsters and their War Machines have definitely got better overall, I would say. Now, obviously, but having said that, Skaven is still a Horde army intrinsically, so I still think we're probably going to see people play into that, because again, there's still a lot of bonuses to with abilities and spells that kind of play very much around like how many models you have on the table. So you're going to definitely want to work into that. Now, having said that, I'm not entirely sure in what direction the meta is going to go, because remember, there's still multiple great clans, and last edition, in my opinion, I kind of felt like the whole idea was to bring units from every single one, because the whole idea of how they worked is that they interacted with their hero. So you brought you brought a Pestilence hero, you can bring a Pestilence unit as battle line. Or you bring a Verminous unit, you can bring a Verminous battle line, and etc. etc. This one, from looking at their heroic traits and their spells and the different formations, knee-jerk reaction from me is I think it's kind of going with the idea of going into more mono faction, maybe leaning more heavily into things like all Pestilence or maybe all Scryer. But obviously, there's going to be many advantages to bringing mixed units. I'm just wondering how things will end up working out in the wash. Slaves to Darkness. Overall, I have less to say on them, but because in my opinion, I think they actually changed less than what I was expecting. Army traits are still roughly similar. We still have the Eye of the Gods table. It's you wipe out. It's been somewhat simplified now in that I think it's now it's based more around it's simplified in general. Like, for one thing, it just has a flat table that just affects everything, heroes, units, everything. See, before I guess there was a somewhat convoluted system where, you had to, like, roll a dice and then, like, add something but subtract something if it was a hero. It just, it was cool. I thought it was cool, but I do admit it was a little weird the way they worked it out. Anyway, it's been simplified now to just a simple roll off, and then you just get whatever it is, so it can apply to everything. You get it when you wipe out another unit. It's fine. Yeah. Overall, I would say overall, because there's less abilities on it, I would say it's probably less impactful than the other ones were, because I thought the last table from the last edition had a lot more going for it. Having said that, I still don't think it's going to be that. I still think it's going to be very important. And now, will you plan your army around it? No, because Slaves of Darkness, in my opinion, I don't think any professional player ever really planned any strategy around a random dice roll to get a random benefit. But again, as with all things random, it's free and it's nice to have. So it's always going to be good. So anyway, on top of that too, one big thing that I think everyone knows this already, but it's pretty obvious. I think the biggest takeaway that I thought was the negative against this is you can no longer become a demon prince in the course of the game from the Eye of the Gods table. That's just been taken out. Honestly, I'm a little sad, but I'm not surprised, because GW has been, as outright said, they're taking away summoning and whatnot. So, and getting a free demon prince was in a lot of ways summoning. So I'm not surprised it's gone. Otherwise, yeah, the chart still works as similar before. Mark of Chaos abilities are roughly similar to they were before. I can't remember what each one did, but I think they're very much similar to where they were last edition. If you knew how they worked last edition, you can work them this edition. Nothing's really changed. Formations are looking pretty good. Maybe a couple or maybe a little bit more gimmicky than another one. Like, there's that one where it basically allows you to, like, I think, like, blow up an objective or something. It's still good, but, again, it's a little gimmicky. On top of that, too, some of them are really kind of pushing the idea of running Dark Oath, and I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm sold on the idea of, like, really building your army around Dark Oath units in general. I kind of feel like they're kind of, like, Dark Oath even though GW kind of seems to want to push this idea of Dark Oath being able to be brought as their own army. Even looking at the War Scrolls, beyond maybe just bringing, like, a fluffy list for fun, I'm just not really seeing them as an independent army. They're kind of, I don't know, unless you brought them in really big numbers, they're just lacking in durability. I don't think they really hit that hard. And just the rest of the army just brings so much to the table and a lot of times better, that I personally, I don't know if I would use any formations that really push Dark Oath. Well, I guess except that one formation. There is one formation that allows you to bring back destroyed units of Dark Oath. So, recursion's always good. But again, that's going into the assumption you're even really bringing a ton of Dark Oath around that's even going to be an issue, that's even going to matter that much. Like, I honestly see people leaning more heavily into, like, Cavalry and, like, Chaos Warriors and, like, Chaos Chosen, which, in my opinion, that's where the real sauce is. Chaos Knights, etc. Anyway, moving, but still, the formations in and of themselves are still pretty good. They're just, Anyway, like I said, Slaves of Darkness, same as I mentioned before with the Skaven, big army syndrome, lots of units to use, so you got lots of variety. Again, the good news thing with that is that you can tailor your army to fit how the meta's going. But it can be a con in that, especially if you're starting out, figuring out what the heck you're going to get in the first place. Beyond that, yeah, like I said, there's still pretty good magic in the army as a whole too. Actually, I would say very good magic because you got good magic and you got plenty of good wizards to cast it with. So Slaves of Darkness can definitely go you can definitely play the magic phase if you want to go with it. And honestly, but in addition to that, though, in my opinion, still some of the best monsters and war machines in the game, in my opinion, especially monsters. You know, Slaves of Darkness has always been, as in my opinion, always been really good at pushing really monsters in general. Now, some of their monsters have traditionally sucked, well, but there's always been some good ones that made up for it. My opinion, I think that GW did a much better job balancing the armies in the book. For example, like the slaughter brute, sorry, and the Mutilith Vortex Beast. They're looking a lot better this edition than they did last edition. So you might actually see those on the table more. And obviously, you probably have the best monster in the game, Archaon. He still slaps like he always did, and yeah, he might actually arguably be better this edition, but we're gonna find out. Like I said, now, as I said at the beginning of all this, we definitely lost some units. Like I said, all the Warcry warbands are all gone. The whole idea is you go for Dark Oath now more than anything. You still have some other options regardless of that. For example, you still have your Chaos Legionnaires. You still have your Chaotic Beasts, like your Raptidons or Raptorix or whatever they're called, and the Chaos Furies. You got some cheap chaff right there. But again, like I said, I think this army, like Slaves of Darkness at all, I think meta-wise, this edition, I think, is definitely going to favor going more elite. So I think probably the more effective armies are going to be the ones that lean into the heavy durability. So, bringing your Chaos Warriors, heavy-hitting Chaos Knights, your Varangard running up, slaughtering everyone in their table. And, you know what, maybe even some Chaos Marauder Horsemen, just to, Dark Oath Marauder Horsemen. Just for unit grabbing. That's one thing that Slaves of Darkness have always been good at. They're also very good with their cavalry, and I expect that to be, pushed more this edition. Another, but a con in that regard, though, I'm a little sad that Beasts of Chaos, some of the Beasts of Chaos units didn't get ported over. With the Beast of Chaos getting phased out in a year, I was kind of hoping maybe GW might take this opportunity, save some orphan units that were going to be taken out, like the Chaos Gargant and, the Chaos Hounds, I kind of was hoping, or was it War Dogs? I forget. Whatever. But there's definitely some units in the Beasts of Chaos that I think could have been, ported over into the Slaves of Darkness to save them, but I guess not. Yeah. So now the Disciples of Tzeentch, the Wizarding Boys. Well, as always, yeah, there's a heavy emphasis on wizards with these guys. Again, nothing really intrinsically has really changed much with these armies. Beyond some rules, change-ups, and some additions and removals, the intrinsic idea of the armies are still there. And again, now, one big thing I will say about the Disciples of Tzeentch, a sizable chunk of the army, unit abilities, your battle traits, and even on some of your spells and unit abilities all revolve around this weird flame mechanic. So for those who might have missed it, so basically, it's essentially a keyword that goes on certain weapons, but you can also kind of use it with also certain abilities too. It just basically means is that when you harm other units, like enemy units, you basically give them something called the burning keyword, which basically cause them to take mortal wounds each turn on a die roll, or get rid of it by giving up a healing. In a lot of ways, it's kind of similar to how the disease mechanic works with the Magickin of Nurgle, and a lot of things in the army work interact with it. Some units, the flank, they're some units I can't remember off the top of my head, but they get bonuses to wound if they attack a burning unit. Some spells can give units to burning. it's fine for what it is, but in my opinion, with a lot of these like these gimmick rules, I kind of feel like where they cause mortal wounds. I'm just wondering how much utility they'll have. Like for example, like okay, sure, in theory, you can giving out D3 mortal wounds to everything on the table, but in practice, how many mortal wounds are you actually giving out? You know. Yeah, I mean, it could be good, or like again, you could have games where it just does nothing. I just kind of feel it's a little inconsistent. But anyway, maybe we're using it more as like an army factor that activates other abilities. Maybe that's a better way to look at it, I guess. Also, again, as expected, it's one of the few armies in the game that still has multiple spell lores. Good news, I feel like both of the spell charts are looking pretty good. In fact, actually, I kind of like actually both have some spells that I think I really like. And don't forget, you can only choose. I think you can still only choose like one spell lore for a game. So be very careful on which one you pick going into a game, because as I said, some like you'll see very quickly. There's going to be some spells on one that you really want, but you're going to have to take another spell lore to get the ones you really need, depending on the game. So keep that in mind. As for the spells themselves, they're actually pretty good as befitting Tzeentch. You got some damage ones. You got some ones that allow you to do like movement shenanigans. You got buffing spells. You got debuffing spells. Yeah, it's just a good toolbox all around. The army overall is still, it's still very much a shoot. I think it can still lean into the shooting meta. It's still probably one of the biggest shooting armies in Chaos as a whole, besides the Skaven and maybe also the Hedonites of Slaanesh. That's still looking good. I was a little bit concerned just on a first read through on maybe some of the infantry choices. I feel like maybe some of their infantry, like their Arcanite units, maybe have lost a little bit of damage potential. But you know what? I think you'll be fine with enough things like like command abilities and spells and buff stacking. I think you'll be okay probably. Also, I'm glad they also dialed back horrors now. So yeah, they definitely I think the idea of splitting pink horrors from the blue and the brimstone horrors was a good idea. Yeah, horrors I think were one of the best anvils in the game for like three whole editions, and GW was having a really hard time balancing them, so I'm glad they dialed them back a bit. And again, but I'll close out saying, I'm still a little concerned about the designers really pushing this idea of playing around with giving out the burning keyword. Again, I'm not it can be annoying for some people having to keep track of it. Especially for both for your opponent to remember who's burning, and for you to remember which ones you need, because you need to roll for the damage, and also for some units who interact with burning. I just personally don't know if it's going to do enough damage in the long run to have really been a big thing. I just kind of feel like maybe they could have done a more direct damage army-wide ability, but whatever. That's just personally that's just a personal gripe. I don't think it's intrinsically bad. I would have just done something different. Okay, so Maggotkin of Nurgle. Again, very similar to the previous one. Overall, the formations in this army, actually, yeah, they're looking pretty good. Now, I do feel like none of them particularly stand out to me in that, there's sometimes you can look at formations and one just kind of obviously looks like the obvious good one. Maybe it's because I don't really play I don't really play Maggotkin of Nurgle. I've not really played against them much either. So maybe I just don't have enough experience to know what their real strengths are. All of them just kind of seem fine to me. They just, I neither was impressed nor unimpressed with any of them. They just seem fine. The disease mechanic has definitely also been reworked. Now it's just a flat D3 every turn if you're diseased. Rather than, tallying up disease points and then rolling a bunch of D6s up to 7 and doing a bunch of mortal wounds. I do feel this one is definitely less bookkeepy, it's much easier to remember, much easier to get through. But I do overall, though, I think you'll get more, on average, I think you'll get more damage across the board with this, even if you're not going to spike like you did last edition. So overall, as someone who tends to favor averages over spiking, I think that's a good thing. Yeah, and again, and also like much like their rivals, Disciples of Zinj, a lot of their army abilities and even spells work and interact with the disease keyword. So again, you're definitely gonna if you're playing this army, you're definitely gonna get as many units diseased as possible because it's gonna help you. Overall, it has good army mechanics, good spells. Befitting Nurgle, a lot of their spells revolve around the idea of debuffing the enemy and increasing your own toughness. Again, very similar to last edition. And that also goes too for a lot of their heroes too, because a lot of their heroes all basically like pretty much all their foot heroes especially are all about giving your infantry, namely your putrid blight kings, buffs in different scenarios. Like depending on the scenario, it gives them all a different buff. So that's pretty good too. I actually think in terms of like overall toughness, I actually think the army might have even gotten more tough. Given that I think there's more ways to get like wound reduction and healing across the board in the army. Now obviously this will need some play testing, but knee-jerk reaction, yeah, I think they're actually slightly tougher than they were before. Again, you can't spam. Now, again, I think this is all balanced, though, by the fact is, again, you can't spam mortal wounds as you were before. Like, sometimes if you got a really good thing going, you could just, like, get, like, every unit on the board up to 7 disease points, and then, roll well. You're getting mortal wounds across the table. That's not really much of a thing anymore. So I think it all balances out in the end. Overall, it's an attrition army that plays how an attrition army probably should go. Super tough, super durable, gets into combat, outlasts everything it's fighting, and just tries to grind your opponent down. Pure attrition, you gotta love it. Now, Hedonites of Slaanesh. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little worried about these guys going into the edition, because, look, I think a lot of people were, look, we all saw the army traits, we all saw what, those, what their abilities did, where, you can give yourself a bunch of bonuses, but then you're essentially giving your opponent free 6s. Not gonna lie, I still think that's annoying, but now that I actually have seen some games played with them and how it actually all functions together, I think I finally I do see what GW is going with. The idea with them is going overboard in one thing but having a negative consequence. Before in the last edition, it was your opponent, giving them a temptation dice, but giving them, a negative if they resisted. This one is actually, no, the temptation now is for the player himself, him or herself, sorry. In that, okay, you definitely, giving your units buffs, like run and charge, exploding hits is all good, but if you tempt yourself and take too many, you have to pay the price for that. But having seen this in action here, I think there will be times where you actually do want to go all 3, and even if you are giving your opponent 6 dice, because on many of their units in the army, they want to be running and charging. They want to have exploding hits, and it really helps, and it really goes on this army, because this is an army that can spew out a ridiculous amount of attacks where exploding hits are big. So I think having seen it in order, I think the idea now is that knowing when to go out in giving yourself, what is it even called? The ecstatic or the I honestly forget. Sorry, but essentially the idea though now is knowing exactly when to go, giving yourself to go all 3, and when to dial it back a little and only give out 1. Because remember, one of the biggest things people were worried about, euphoric. Oh my God, it just came to me. Yes, giving yourself the euphoric keyword. That's what it is. The whole idea is that if you only give 1 unit euphoric, your opponent can't do their massive 12-inch charge. But there will be times where, your opponent's all locked in combat. There's going to be times where, even with 12 inches, they can't charge you. Then you do 2. And then in later game, when you want to go in for the final kill, like, for example, your turn, then you go all 3 and then give as many units as you can euphoric, then you go in and fight it. So that's something to consider. Formations, I think formations also are pretty good overall. Again, I think this is an army that kind of goes into like the idea of speed. So you might want to take the formations that kind of like give bonuses to speed. But then again, though, I think with this army is like you already got some units that are pretty fast. You can give them euphoric and all, along with other like spell and unit ability shenanigans to make them go even faster. Maybe you actually don't necessarily have to take the formation for speed, but ultimately I think this is going to depend on what your play style is going to be, because technically speaking, Slaanesh can actually go tanky. You do have some tanks in this in this army. Not a lot, but a few. Now, I don't think I brought it up before, but basically all the God-aligned armies that you don't summon, like basically how their summoning mechanic works, it's usually based around their greater demons or some key heroes. There's very few that have any summoning mechanics in their actual army traits. Well, the only one that comes to mind is the Blades of Corn with their blood tithe. But beyond that, the whole thing with their recursion is that generally speaking, for example with Slaanesh, their recursion is based around their Keepers of Secrets, bringing back dead demon units. So that's something you need to remember. So, and another reason, and I guess it goes without saying, another reason why you probably should bring a Keeper if you're going heavy demon. Overall, though, the army is still lacking a certain amount of durability. But again, you can still capitalize. I think you can get around this by capitalizing on your speed shenanigans, and you can still actually, even though you might not be super tough, you can still get quite a bit of wound density in this army. Between all your cavalry and some of your beasts, and some of your chariots and whatnot, you can still get quite a few, chunky units on the board that can take a few licks. So, I think Hedonites, in my opinion, are definitely more durable than they look at first glance, because another big thing about it is too, they have many ways to debuff your opponent, like remove attacks or making themselves hard to wound, or affect your opponent's charge distances. There's between their speed and their ways to mess with your opponent, they're definitely more durable in practice than they look on paper. And again, one of the things that I think, why I think euphoric keyword, giving that out, is so important, a lot of Slaanesh's damage output is based around the concept of weight of attacks. Like, there's many units in this book that have tons of attacks, and just imagine every single one of them having critical hit 2. I can just see like certain things like chariots and even Slangors running in and then just with exploding hits, and this getting tons more damage in. Again, like I said, another thing with Slaanesh, they can be glass cannons, emphasizing the cannon a lot. In addition, they've got pretty good spells. Yeah, they got buffs, they got debuffs, they got all the good stuff. As I mentioned before, there's many, like I said, there's many ways to mess with your opponent. And because of this, I think Slaanesh definitely need to capitalize on that, because again, you're not Nurgle. You can't just take hits for days and keep going, and you're also not Skaven. You don't have like an unlimited amount of 20 man units just coming at you constantly. You gotta make your opponent strike last, affect their combat stats, mess with their to wound, mess with their charging, like make them trip over their own 2 feet. That is how I think Slaanesh is going to work in this new edition. It's how they've worked before. Nothing else has changed in that regard. Now, everyone's arguable favorite, Blades of Corn. Yeah, as I mentioned before, the Blood Tithe is still around. It's been changed up, but it's still good. Overall, I'd say it's been, aspects of it have been turned down. Like, you can't spam Mortal Wounds quite like you can. That move automatically 3 inches, Blood Tithe ability that everyone thought was broken last edition, that's been toned down, but otherwise it's still pretty much the same. It's still also one of the few army traits that still allow you to bring a unit back on. Like, for example, that's essentially the only way you can bring back a Bloodthirster. But otherwise, yeah, it's still pretty good. Like I said, it works the same way. Your unit or an opponent's unit dies, you get a blood tithe. Simple as that. And there's other ways in the book you can get it, like you can get it through like like heroic traits, and certain unit abilities can give you blood tithe as well. So there's ways you can game it. Again, as always though, because of this, this is still an army that wants lots of heroes on the table. Like again, Khorne loves its synergy. You've got a lot of heroes that can do a lot of good things. You're definitely like you probably, if you play Blades of Khorne through third, you know that they like to bring their synergy with their hordes. So nothing's changed in that regard. Keep doing what you've been doing. Army as a whole, it still encourages fast combat, lots of lost units. Like again, if you want this army to ultimately work properly, you got to get into combat as quickly as possible. You got to start killing things as soon as possible, or failing that, die trying. That's the best way. That's the best way to get your units going. But again, make sure you don't lose lose the forest for the trees, because at the end of the day, you can't lose all your units. And remember, there's no summoning anymore. So don't think you can lose all your 90% of your units and then summon on like some like a bunch more demons. No, you can only bring back units. So and only if certain units are still on the table. So again, be careful. Still though, you've got a lot of tanky units in the Blades of Khorne. Obviously, you've got some softer units, but you still got plenty of anvil in the army. But again, still plenty of hammer. But having said that, I still don't quite know why GW really likes this idea of like the Khorne army being the highly intellectual one, because like there's so much synergies. You got to remember, so many things that if go perfectly right can be really good. It's just I find it ironic that the army that's about a bunch of blood crazed killers that scorn scorn spells and higher learning, and yet the army itself is actually, you need to have a reasonable IQ to play it. I just kind of feel it's a little ironic in a way. Having said that, also, this is still an army that really hates wizards. You've got a lot of ways to screw over wizards, so keep that in mind. That's not changed. Honestly, given how I think this edition is really going to be encouraging fast combats, and there's also ways that you can also interact more in your opponent's turn, I actually think Blades of Khorne may come up a little bit in the world. Like in past editions, Blades of Khorne have never really been the top of the heap, but you know what? I could see them having the ability this edition to make somewhat of a comeback. I don't know if they'll ever be the top of the meta, but I can see them getting up there. Okay, you know what? I kind of debated even including this, but you know what? They're still technically still official, so I guess I might as well bring them up too. Beasts of Chaos as a thing, yes, they still do exist. And unlike all the others, they don't have an index. They have a quote-unquote battle tome. Probably the last battle tome this incarnation of Beasts of Chaos will ever have. And it even says in said battle tome that, yes, this army will be entering Legends this time next year, so enjoy them while you can. Looking through the rules, looking through the war scrolls, they are fine for what they are. But again, they're not going to be getting regular updates. They're not really probably going to be getting that many FAQs. They won't be brought up much, if at all, in any of the lore. They're really just here to give, some people who own Beasts of Chaos a mourning phase where they can still play their stuff, even though they know their army has an expiration date, which is very unfortunate. Having said that, I still have some, I guess you could say, some copium, cut very heavily with hopium that, GW will update the range, give an updated range and bring them back someday in the future, because they are mentioned in the lore as they will still exist. Like, the whole idea with them is that they got their butts kicked so hard during the Vermin Doom and the beginning of the Age of Ruin that all their alpha beasts, all their beast lords or whatever, they were all killed, which led their herds to, break apart and disappear into the wild. So the idea is that they're still out there. They're just, they're not essentially organized. They're not just, as the Beastmen as an overall faction have been broken. There's no coordination with them. They're just not relevant on a mortal realm scale anymore. So yeah, in my opinion, I think they will come back in that regard, but it's probably not going to be for a while, like a good while, because I don't think the Beastmen were ever really selling that huge, so it's probably going to be a few years, probably more than that until we see them again. But keep the hope alive. That's all I can say. So my thoughts overall, yeah, the indexes, as I've said, I think GW has done a legit job of making these indexes actually playable. Again, because as we probably all know, like obviously the battle tomes aren't all going to come out at the same time. It might be years before some of these armies get a proper battle tome. So these indexes obviously had to be designed to be playable for the foreseeable future while they work everything out. And honestly, the Chaos indexes, I think they're pretty good. Do I think they're good as the order ones? Hard to say. We're gonna have. I still feel. I think I lean towards more of the order armies. Being able to leverage the new 4th edition more, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Personally, I'm actually the ones that I think I was most happy with were the Hedonites of Slaanesh and the Mangakin of Nurgle, because I feel like I really feel, well, in the former's instance, I feel like they're not as bad as people were fearing they were going to be. Like, people were thinking, well, I think people were just got too hung up on the idea of, oh, you're giving your opponent a 12-inch charge, but they weren't looking at the bigger picture of what the rest of the army as a whole can do. And Mangakin of Nurgle, well, I just honestly just liked the army as a concept last edition, even though I didn't really play it much. But so I actually like they kept it conceptually similar to what it was before. After that, all the others are still fine. Slaves of Darkness, I think, is still a very potent army, and we're going to see it on the table. Blades of Khorne is just going to be blading as always. Disciples of Tzeentch, I need to see some more playtesting on. I'm just a little bit worried their damage output may have been sacrificed a bit just for the sake of a gimmick of the burning keyword, but we'll find out. And Skaven, Skaven are, they're Skaven. Yeah, they're the new poster boys. I think they're going to be fine. So, anyways, I hope you stayed to the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and see you for the next one. Bye.